Welcome to the Polar Steam Cool Connections live stream. While we are waiting for folks to join, please post in the chat where you're watching from. And if others are joining you, like a classroom or a summer camp, we'd love to know how many people are watching from your location. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Jamie Ivory, the logistics coordinator for the Polar Steam program, and we are excited to have you join us today. Polar STEAM is a U.S. NSF-funded program based at Oregon State University that facilitates virtual and field-based collaborations between polar researchers, educators, and artists to enhance science communication, bringing polar science to everyone. A recording of this live stream will be posted on our YouTube channel. We will keep the focus of today's events on this team's stories and experiences as they work to uncover deep secrets of the lakes in Greenland. However, I will mention that the 2026-27 Antarctic Artists and Writers Fellowship process is progressing for the upcoming season. You can see the Antarctic researchers we'll be working with on our website now, and we look forward to sharing updates on placements for the artists very soon. Applications for the Polar STEAM Antarctic Artists and Writers program and the Educator program for the 2027-28 season are open. And attention to our researchers, we are currently recruiting NSF-funded polar researchers for the 2027 collaborations. If you have questions about our artist, educator, or researcher programs, please refer to the information on our website. And we'd love to invite you to come join us at the Polar STEAM Summit. This is an in-person event held in Corvallis, Oregon, October 1st through the 3rd, where polar science, art, and education intersect and curiosity comes to life. Here you can strengthen your broader impacts and science communication skills, share your work in creative and engaging ways, and build meaningful networks. So today we are going to be live from Greenland. We're excited to share two of our Polar STEAM fellows and their experiences with all of you. Amanda Gavin and Heather Vingsness will be making their journey back from a field site in southern Greenland. We will start with a presentation from the fellows and follow that with questions from all of you, our viewers. You can submit your questions in the live chat. Our team will monitor those questions and then they will be asked at the end of this presentation. Now I'd like to introduce our fellows. Amanda Gavin is a limnologist at the University of Maine who focuses on freshwater lake response to environmental change. And Heather Vingsness is a museum educator and science outreach specialist at University of Michigan Museum of Natural History. Amanda, Heather, welcome. Now I'll turn it over to you all so that you can share with us your experience studying lakes in southern Greenland.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start off by sharing the science. Like Jamie said, my name's Amanda Gavin. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Maine, and I am an interdisciplinary limnologist and aquatic ecologist. And so we are in southern Greenland. You can see it's at the very bottom of the island that is Greenland. We're technically below the Arctic Circle, so this is a subarctic landscape. And on the right, you can see part of the green area that we were doing field research in at the head of the fjord, just below the ice sheet. And right now we are in the city of Qaqortoq. It's a small city in southern Greenland, but we spent about 10 days in the field in a small settlement called Qasiarsuk, which is a farming settlement in South Greenland. And so farming in the Arctic is an interesting concept. South Greenland is the first known example of agriculture in the Arctic. Arctic or sheep farming came here with the Norse about 1,000 years ago, but contemporary sheep farming is something that's practiced by Inuit sheep farmers. And I just wanted to share some photos of some pictures I've taken over the years of sheep next to lakes and some barns from that sheep farmers have and sheeps and horses. And so, given that this is a agricultural landscape that has shaped the science questions that I'm asking, and so I'm interested in taking a multi-scalar approach towards a holistic understanding of carbon cycle and lake level in an agricultural subarctic landscape. And this question arose from chatting with sheep farmers. We did farm tours and shared meals with them and just got a sense of what are they thinking about. And one of the big themes in these conversations was changing weather and climate, and particularly increasing drought conditions. And this figure shows um, it's basically a drought metric, and you can see that since 2006, this region has been in a drought. And so that's a main concern of sheep farmers. And given that, I became interested in understanding how lake level changes over time. Lakes in this landscape are used for drinking water for humans and animals. They're also sometimes part of irrigation systems and so how is lake level changing? And to ask that question, I deployed lake level sensors that look at daily to annual resolution. So we can capture event scale changes in response to a large rain event or a dry summer, and look at how that changes in between years. And also we talk to local sheep farmers and learn about what they've observed in event and seasonal timescales, but then to really understand how contemporary lake level during this drought compares to historical lake level, we use paleolimnological methods and have reconstructed planktic and benthic diatoms to get a sense of how lake level has changed over the past 130 years. And then the second part of my project is understanding how agriculture and abrupt climate change impact carbon cycling. This also has a paleo component where we took 4 sediment cores from different types of lakes and measured organic carbon burial, bulk carbon and nitrogen concentrations, and some isotopes. And we date that using lead-210. And then when we can look at these parameters over time, we can get a sense of how they change when hayfields were introduced, when sheep were reintroduced, and with abrupt climate change that really began in the early 2000s. And so what are we learning? From the contemporary lake level, when we look at that over 7 different lakes across the open water season, what we see is that lakes do respond to precipitation. Lake level increases after a usually large precipitation event. But what was interesting is different lake types respond coherently to precipitation. And then from the paleolimnological reconstruction, we found that the low lake levels that are happening post 2000 are kind of an anomaly, and they correspond with the really dry conditions and low numbers on the drought index. And over the rest of the time period, we do see higher lake levels. So when we bring it all together, it suggests that these um, lower lake levels currently are lower than they have been over the past 130 years, and that's likely due to the drought conditions. And so this figure shows organic carbon burial over time in 4 different lakes. Some lakes have grazing only in the watershed. One lake has a small watershed, and then another lake has a hayfield that dominates the watershed. And in the lakes that are light blue and orange that have relatively lower amounts of agriculture, we can see a signal of precipitation and heavy sheep grazing. Um, where the carbon burial peaks is when precipitation is highest over this time period, and it's when there's the most sheep on the landscape. And so we see that carbon burial response. But then in the lake that has a large hayfield, we really see increasing carbon burial over time, likely due to increased nutrient inputs and eutrophication. And I think this work is important and matters because Arctic amplification is a phenomenon that means the climate change that's happening across the globe is amplified in the Arctic, and this is a disproportionate response because the Arctic does not produce as much, people in the Arctic do not produce as much greenhouse gas emissions as people throughout the rest of the globe, yet they really bear the brunt of anthropogenic climate change. And so I do think we all have a global responsibility to consider what Arctic amplification means for people living in the Arctic. And on these sheep farms, it's about people's lives. This is the preferred sustainable economic pathway for residents in South Greenland, and sheep farming is important for economic livelihood and also food sovereignty. And so, any way that this work can contribute to people being able to have sustainable sheep farms and self-determination and how they live their lives, I think is really important.
Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here in Greenland, my name's Heather, and I'm here as a educator to learn more about what this research is and what is happening and share it with the world. And through my professional experience at the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History, one of my primary roles professionally is to interpret science for the public. Specifically, in my role, I interpret science for middle school classrooms and a huge variety of outreach events. And I haven't really had the chance before to participate in the research that I'm trying to interpret. And so I'm really excited about this experience to be able to see what is research in the field, what does it look like, what questions is Amanda asking, how does Amanda collect her information, and how does she answer the questions that she's trying to solve. And um, and that's why I'm here, and I'm excited to uh, eventually share this science with the public. So here's me in Kukortak, in the field. I was expecting all of Greenland to look like this, by the way, but really, only like further inland on the ice sheet will you find this large number of icebergs and ice. Thank you, Jamie. So some of the things that I did while I was here to help understand what Amanda's research is and how it works is the first thing we did was we carried all the stuff out to the lakes. So she does research on lakes. When she first described that she was doing paleolimnology, I thought that she was just going to be looking maybe at fossils, but actually what we're looking at is the ancient sediment on the bottom of lake beds. And in order to get that sediment, we had to get out to these lakes. And being in Greenland, there's really no easy way to get there. A lot of these lakes have no direct roads that go to them. And so we hiked all of our stuff out to the lakes. So this is us hiking out to one of the 6 lakes that Amanda's featured in her research. There was a team of 10 of us involved in this project. And so here's a photograph specifically of Amanda's direct lab team. And so there was a lot of equipment that we had to haul out. I had no idea that studying lakes required so much stuff. I mean, obviously it involved a boat, but what I didn't imagine slash realize is that we had to carry the boat out there ourselves. And so we took an inflatable boat, we rolled it up, we fit it in the backpack, we had to carry the oars, we had to carry the buoys, we had to carry the safety equipment. Amanda does a lot of her research studies using buoys that we'll see in a few slides. We had to carry our water quality testing samples because how does she know that carbon is being found in these lake beds, we have to test for those sorts of things. So we have to carry out all of our water testing supplies. And then the most interesting thing that we had to carry was these giant metal tubes, because in order to study the sediment in the lake, we had to get sediment from the bottom of the lake, which is pretty deep. And in order to reach down there, we had to use these giant metal tubes and carry them several miles through the Arctic tundra. So that was a learning experience. And each lake was different. So Amanda's studying 6 different lakes. And one of the things I learned about her research and the research questions is that you want to have different comparison lakes. I've always imagined that in science that you have to have a control group and then different variable groups, but you can't really have a control group in a natural process in a natural lake. So what Amanda has taught me is that you have to have a lot of different comparisons and a lot of different things in the lakes to say, is it this that's changing? Is it this? You can't really have a control lake. But this was one of the lakes that we studied on. Some of the lakes had streams that went in and out. Some of them had hay fields. You can see Amanda out on the boat and then us on the shore, waiting for her triumphant return with the sediment. And in the background, you can see this really green patch in the back, and that's a hayfield for the sheep. And so the farmers will go out in the middle of the Arctic tundra and they'll irrigate and plant hay for their sheep, which live out in the field all summer and then get herded back sometime in the fall. And we wanted to see if some of the lakes near hayfields had different water quality and data than the ones that weren't near hayfields. So that was this particular lake. And so in order to get the results that she did, I was really fascinated by the tools and equipment that they use to come to these answers. Because when you read the papers and you see all the graphs and figures, you might imagine that Amanda's job is entirely math, but it's actually really creative. It's really creative and thoughtful and involves so many different pieces of equipment that you have to ask yourself and imagine, I want to study what lakes were like 200 years ago. How do I do that? And once you have your research question, and I knew and understood how like research questions come up with, you're like, oh, I want to come up with something that no one's ever studied before and think about it and come up with a test, etc. But you don't really imagine that you yourself, as Amanda, has to come up with like, how do I test for this based on the science of other uh, people that have been published and those methods that have been done before, and how can I use those methods in new and creative ways? So this is what Amanda and her team did that I thought was fascinating. There's me in the pink, um, looking very neon-y colored. And this tall tube thing is actually a core sample from the lake bed bottom. So what Amanda did was she took a boat out into the middle of the lake with those like 14 giant metal tubes and then shoved them down into the dirt and then pushed them until you got into the stuff at the bottom of the lake, and then pulled up like a little chunk of that stuff from the bottom of the lake, capped it, and then rowed it to shore very carefully and upright so it didn't spill. And then we went through and it was like a little push pop, and you would push up half-centimeter little chunks at a time, and you can see in this picture on the right all the little oozy dirt from sediment mixed with ancient algae from the bottom of the lake. And we would scrape it off in these little individual bags so that she could study each group of a few years, which was in like each little baggie, each little chunk was a few years of data. And then that's how Amanda found out what the lake levels were in the past and how to compare them to the lake levels in the future, because different algae will live in the lake depending on if it's deep or not. And so depending on what algae we find in each little puck of soil would tell us what the lake level was in the year that that little puck of soil was created. So she'll go through and carbon date each little puck and say, this one is from 1776, and you could tell the lake level was this high because we found this type of algae mixed into the mud. And I was like, that's insanely cool. How do you even come up with this? She's like, science. And I'm like, all right, awesome. And then, not only did she do that, she compared the historical data to the modern data. And I was like, how do you find out what the lake level is now? Because the lakes in Greenland are obviously going to be covered in ice for a large portion of the year. And so she was like, I have these buoys, and you have to have them so far deep under the water so they don't get iced over, and they have to stay straight, and you have to measure every few feet all the different things. And so these buoys have different little dongle things every meter down, and they'll measure the temperature and they'll measure the water pressure because that's how you know how deep it is. And some of the sensors get covered in muck, and so some of them have little window wipers that go through and clean them off. And it'll tell you how much chlorophyll's in the lake. And every year she has to go row out to the middle of the lake and pull up this buoy. And then I got to help scrub off all the algae so that it could fit into the computer nicely. And we downloaded all the data so that she can do graphs and makes lots of math and see what we find out about this year's lake level. She's been doing this for years.
This is the 5th year that the buoys are out. Yeah.
And this was a super cool device. This is my accidental selfie from the microscope that I was using. I thought it was
Awesome.
hilarious, so I had to include it. Um, So the other thing that we did is they have this really cool device called a Van Doren to capture water at certain depths to see what lives there. So one of the questions that she's asking is what algae lives at each level of the lake. Now they're trying to find out what types of like tiny animals that eat the algae might live at each level of the lake. How does that compare now versus in the past? So this device right here has a really cool bungee and snap trap. It'll snap closed, and so you can capture water at a certain depth. And then we looked at the water under the microscope to find out what lives in Greenland lakes. And we found out lots of copepods, which are a cool type of like shrimpy thing. Yeah, so as part of this experience, I learned that science is insanely creative and that Amanda is insanely creative. I had no idea how much went into not only just asking a research question, but coming up with a way to solve it that is scientifically accurate, relevant, and based on methods that other people have done and proven in the past. And I learned that involves a lot of problem solving, a lot of relationship building. Amanda can't just show up in Greenland and be like, "Hey, can I use your lake?" Um, you gotta build relationships with people for years and years, and find people to get you out to the lakes and to help you, to give you permission and to work with you to talk to you about their sheep farm and ask questions and say, like, how is your sheep farm doing this year? How is it affecting the water? There's so much relationship building that goes into science like this, especially in Greenland where there's so much interest right now. And from this, I'm going to create an activity where students everywhere can do what Amanda does and be creative and solve lake problems themselves. Maybe they'll compare lakes using their algae, making predictions from their data, and maybe just be inspired about the beauty of water.
Cool.
And my last takeaway is how insanely cool this research team is. It was really cool to see how a group of people works together so effectively under such stressful conditions because you only have 9 days to collect all the data you need for an entire year. All the data you might need for maybe an entire master's or a PhD is collected in this 1 week. And so it involved a whole lot of planning, a whole lot of logistics, a whole lot of organization. And I was so impressed with how friendly, welcoming, and amazing everyone was to a complete stranger throughout this process.
And I think one of the big takeaways I mean, I'll say it was such a pleasure to have Heather in the field and get to work with someone who spends it's it's really clear to me that she is a gifted teacher who spends a lot of time like teaching and fostering young learners, and that came out with her like positivity and enthusiasm and just like excitement. And so to see that like through someone else's eyes and just be able to, I mean, it's Greenland is so beautiful, it's not easy to forget that, but to just witness its beauty with someone else and get to see the kind of awe. And I have like no doubt that Heather will bring that awe to her students and really get them excited about this. And it was just refreshing to have that take in the field. And I think it was also just it was a good reminder of how like deep we can get into our work, and Heather just had so many good questions that kind of like pull you out of how deep scientists are in like the minutia of everything and think about it big picture and like how do we even get to our questions? How do we start to tackle them? What is different about how scientists are doing research in the field compared to how we teach the scientific method? And I think we had good conversations and need to have more about we've been so busy in the field, like there's more to talk about just like how do we make these connections like from the field to the classroom. And it was awesome to also just watch Heather like be a scientist. She did was just took the zooplankton and analyzed all of them and took photos and had a microscope and made meaningful contributions to our research, and it was really exciting to have her in the field helping out.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We can show you our background real quick.
Yeah, so this is a cool boat. Do you want to tell them about the cool boat?
This is the Royal Arctic Line. It's an Arctic shipping boat, and it's currently loading up a lot of containers in downtown Kukortak, probably to take them other places in the Arctic.
Yeah, and then behind us, yeah, you can see the city on the shoreline. So this is Kukortak. It's the fourth largest city in Greenland. It has about 3,000 people. And yesterday was Greenland National Day. So there was a flag raising, the national anthem. There was a 5K downtown, 10K downtown,
Yeah, 11K.
11K.
Yeah.
And there was an accordion band, which was really exciting. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's great. What a cool experience to have overlapped with a celebration like that. Did anybody run the 11K?
No, but we cheered them on. Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about your science and your experience. This is really, really wonderful. And we definitely got some questions that came in. One thing we wanted to start off asking was you had mentioned carbon burial a couple of times. And what does that mean? What are you kind of describing and referring to when you talk about carbon burial?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. And I apologize for going deep and not fully giving context. But so as we think about the global carbon budget, we think about what different places on the landscape are sinks or sources of carbon. Are they sequestering carbon or are they releasing carbon? Um, and Arctic lakes and lakes in general are massive stores of carbon. So there's tons of carbon in the sediment bound up. Lakes actually store more carbon per unit area than the ocean. And we think about the changing carbon dynamics in the ocean as being really important for the global carbon budget and how much greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere. And so as the Arctic is warming and permafrost is melting, there's question of how it does that impact organic carbon burial. or released to the atmosphere, and what does that mean for the global carbon cycle? And because there are so many lakes in the Arctic, it likely could mean a lot for the entire cycle across the globe. And this region is interesting because it's subarctic, but there's no permafrost here. So we can look at an area that's warming and has changing hydroclimate and has agriculture and think about what does that mean for this large store of organic carbon at the bottom of the lake. And that's just one piece of the bigger puzzle of how do Arctic lakes contribute to the global carbon cycle, and are they sinks or sources of carbon?
That was really, really helpful. Thanks. I had no idea that they were such impressive sinks compared to the oceans too. Thank you. Um, you had mentioned about the agriculture and, working with the locals. A question came in from the chat. When you're talking about working with the locals, would you say that these are like indigenous peoples of Greenland that you're working with?
Yeah, Greenland is like 98% Inuit Greenlanders, and the sheep farmers that we work with are Inuit sheep farmers. And this is the type of agriculture that they practice is considered a blend of Norse and Inuit animal husbandry.
Yeah, I was
Um,
so excited and interested to learn that most of the sheep that we ran into were just all female sheep out in the fields. That they really carefully control their lineages.
oh, wow.
So the male sheep don't just like run around.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's cool. Um, and someone was asking from the chat, when you were in the field, you had talked about like taking these hikes and carrying all of the equipment and gear with you. And someone was wondering what was the average hike length to get to these lakes, and what was the longest trek you had?
Um, so this year I would say they're probably not as long or wild as you might think. I think our longest hiking day was 5 miles, which isn't nothing when you have a 60-pound pack and 10 people collectively carrying hundreds of pounds of equipment. Um, but we tried to, there's, really only like one or two dirt roads, and we would try to get a ride as close as we could, and then we would hike cross country through the tundra to our lakes, and we try to be strategic and hit, certain lakes on the way in and the way out and strategize with our gear to make it as like easy or feasible as possible. But yeah, I would say the average between like 2 and 5 miles is off trail though, so
Yeah.
that does add some challenges.
Yeah, and Amanda's research team, part of their research team is continuing on for another 2 to 3 weeks in West Greenland, and their hikes are much longer. There's apparently like a 14-mile day.
Yeah, they were just warming up.
Very impressive. Nice.
Yeah.
Um, let's see here. So you were hiking to these lakes, and then did you stay in a town, or were you like camping, or what kind of place did you stay at?
Yeah, we actually stayed in the town of Cassiarsuck, which, unbeknownst to me, was the first settlement of Eric the Red in Greenland. And so there's also a UNESCO heritage site in the same spot. There's a little hostel there run by a fabulous Spanish person and the company Tassermute, who does Greenlandic tours if you're interested in a Greenlandic tour and doing some of this yourself in kayaking. And so there were bunk beds and a beautiful porch. It's in my top three porches.
Yeah, and we had a pretty big group. So some of us were at the hostel, and then we had two other houses that we rented that are sheep farmer hostels. So folks were also staying in accommodations that are set up by sheep farmers. Some people were actually like on the farm, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
and this
definitely.
town is about 30 people, and it took a 2 to 3 hour boat ride from here in a very cool, like inflatable speedboat to get there.
Wow, nice. Let's see. So we're getting a lot of great questions from the chat. Thank you all for being so engaged. Um, and then here's two related questions. So, this research has been going on for 5 years now. Is there anything that you found that has really surprised you? And what are you planning to do with your research results? What are the next steps?
I think we found a handful of things that are surprising. It's really interesting to see how lakes in a region without permafrost are different from permafrost lakes. I was really surprised by the coherence in lake level across lakes that are hydrologically distinct and the patterns that we're seeing in organic carbon burial rates are surprising and different from what we see in other parts of the Arctic and the globe. So disentangling that is fun and exciting, and everything is being prepared for peer-reviewed manuscripts, and that'll be the first place it goes. And then, yeah, we'll see what comes after that.
She's graduating in 2 months.
Yeah, I defend in August, so
Yeah.
coming up.
Oh,
Um,
exciting.
and her lab mates have also found something really cool and exciting in West Greenland where the lakes are suddenly turning brown, like tea leaf brown.
Oh.
And so that's what they're exploring out there. And it's on the Wikipedia page I discovered. If you go on the Wikipedia page for Greenland and you read, you'll see their article. So.
Awesome. And so um, the next step is like publishing the data, and then you've talked about building this community with the locals, and then is there plans on like sharing these findings with the locals and
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we do like as we go. So every year we bring reports to people and we meet with them and go over them. I had I had one visit like that this year, and then other people on our research team had more research sharing and updates. We also, right when we got here, we did a group presentation to a local part of the municipality called Innovation South Greenland. And yeah, we'll continue. We're taking lots of drinking water samples for folks. So those are reports that we'll like go back and share over email as soon as we get the results, and then we'll meet in person next year to talk about them and go through figures. So I think we kind of view it as, instead of like one big thing at the end, it's something we're doing throughout the year when we're not in Greenland, and then having in person like small meetings with in the summertime when we're here. And we were doing that on this trip as well.
um, uh, Hannah wanted to ask Heather if there was one takeaway, one main lesson she should teach a 12th grade zoology class, what would it be?
Ooh, a 12th grade zoology class? Um, so I think for a zoology class, it would be really interesting to learn about the relationship between the lakes and the systems here. There's so many different, it's a really like kind of closed system of animals because there's there's no rodents. It's really just foxes, hares, eagles, polar bears, seals, and whales. Um, and the sheep,
Mhm.
obviously. And so I think it would be really interesting for a zoology class to look at how are the animals like surviving in these lakes? How are they relating to each other? I wonder if I was really curious as to how the eagles are surviving when there's like no mice to eat. I assume they're just eating fish. We also discovered something really cool about the lakes that had fish and the lakes that didn't. So when we were looking under the microscope at the little zooplankton crustaceans, the lakes that had a variety of fish had very few of these crustaceans because they were all getting nibbled and eaten. And so we were curious and wondering, how did they get here? How did they get in these lakes when these lakes are sometimes formed by glaciers? Are they carried here? Are they dropped here? Do fish drop from the sky from the birds that leave them here? Like, what is the microevolution in each of these lakes? Was another question that I was wondering. Yeah, we'll chat, Hannah.
And we had David Cooper had a question. How does the cold Arctic climate affect lake metabolism, and how does that compare to a warmer climate lake like in Michigan?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, some of these results are kind of TBD in the works, but I think um, I've been surprised to see higher rates of primary productivity in the summer, especially after some rain events, and like probably delivery of organic carbon to the watershed. Um, but I think if we were to compare them to a lake like Michigan, I think the ecosystem metabolism in these lakes really like from a societal standpoint benefits from the cold air temperatures in the Arctic because metabolism is in part a temperature mediated process. And I think we might see more productivity if we were in an agricultural environment with warmer air temperatures. So I think the cold air temperatures provide some sort of like resilience from ecosystem metabolism resilience to agriculture, at least for the time being.
Mhm. We're getting such great questions from the chat. We are running a little short on time, so let me see if I'll ask one, maybe two more. How unique are the sediment samples you're taking to the individual lakes they're from? Like, can you identify the lake by its sediment? Can you
Mm.
identify its age?
We can identify, I don't know that we've been identifying the lake age itself, but the sediment in each lake is different.
Hmm.
Yeah, they vary and are a combination of the lake morphometry, so what are the in-lake characteristics, and then also what's in the watershed, I think are some of the main drivers. And like Heather said, every lake is different, so we do see different algae and pigments and um, carbon and nitrogen in each lake sediment.
Yeah, and when we pulled out the lake cores, you could tell in each lake some of them were grainier. Some of them we found in the very bottom in the like 2,000-year-old area. We found like leaves, whole leaves, or chunks of wood chips, little bits of shells. So I really do think that every lake is different. I don't think I could like look at it and be like, oh, that's this one specifically from this like from its mud, but once
Yeah.
you analyze it.
Oh, very cool. Um, we are unfortunately out of time to ask any remaining questions, but thank you, Heather and Amanda, and thanks everyone for your questions. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen again. Okay. All right. Thank you again, Amanda and Heather, for taking the time to share your science and your experience. And we hope that your travels home go really smoothly. To all our viewers, again, thank you for joining us and asking such insightful questions. There are many ways to engage with Polar Steam. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and follow us on social media at Polar Steam Team. To see our blog, educational resources, and program information, check out our website. As a reminder, a recording of this live stream will be posted on our YouTube channel. We'd also like to invite you to join us on our next Cool Connections live stream this Thursday, the 25th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We'll be at Toolik Station in Alaska to learn about the carbon cycle. So again, Carbon Week this week. The carbon cycle as part of a long-term ecological research project. Thank you so much for tuning in to Polar Steam's Cool Connections today, and we hope to see you at our next one. Bye-bye.